Hello, I'm Matt Galloway, and this is The Current Podcast. Round 2 of the U.S. presidential debates was by all accounts a grudge match, but while the teams were the same, one of those players was different.
As a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now.
Kamala Harris took center stage for the Democrats in her first presidential debate since President Joe Biden stepped aside, but the relationship between the two was one that Republican candidate Donald Trump made sure to emphasize.
They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
For who won and lost and what last night means for the weeks leading up to the November 5th election, I'm joined by Matthew Bartlett, Republican strategist and former Trump State Department appointee, and by Simon Rosenberg, former advisor to the 1992 Bill Clinton campaign and a longtime Democratic strategist. Both are in Washington, D.C. this morning. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Simon, this was Kamala Harris's first presidential debate. What did she have to do last night, and did she succeed?
I think she did succeed. I think this was a great night for her. She was strong and confident, prepared, presidential. And Trump was unfit and unwell and untethered, as we all expected. And so I think the contrast between somebody who's clearly ready to be president and somebody who is not, I think was very stark for the American people last night. And we saw it even in the immediate polls that came out after. CNN said 63% said she won the debate. So Democrats feel good today. It's a close election. We've got a lot of work to do.
Right off the hop, I mean, she walked across the stage to give him a handshake and introduced herself, saying, "I'm Kamala Harris." What do you think she was trying to do with that?
I think she was trying to do what she talks about in her campaign every day, which is to restore a degree of civility, to turn the page on this awful era of Trump, and to restore America to a time of decency and civility. You notice that I appreciate you raising that because Trump struggled. I mean, she walked over to him, put out her hand, said, "Hi, I'm Kamala Harris." And he kind of walked away and was, uncomfortable with the whole exchange. It was really an important moment early on in the debate where you saw somebody who wants to engage with her opponent. She's not angry and upset, and because she wants to be a president for all Americans. I think she said that repeatedly last night.
Matthew, same question to you. What did Donald Trump have to do last night, and did he do it?
There were many Republicans that wished Donald Trump was Reagan-esque on the debate stage. And I think, unfortunately, he came across as rather reckless. This was, for all intents and purposes, a classic Donald Trump performance. As alluded to earlier, he was undisciplined, unfocused, and at times unhinged. He has been a central part of American politics. He has been the leader of the Republican Party for over a decade now. He certainly is who he is. If there were expectations of changing, either post-assassination or certainly now in this new race versus Kamala Harris, he certainly did not change his style or any of his tactics. It was not the best night for the former president, who just did not contrast well.
Are you surprised that he took the bait on things? I mean, she teased out this idea that people were leaving his rallies because they were bored with what he was saying. And you could see what she was trying to do, and he couldn't help himself but say that his rallies were enormous and that people weren't leaving. Are you surprised that he took that bait?
No. And again, we all at home knew what was coming. Everyone, who reads the papers, everyone who's tuned into this race knew the Kamala Harris campaign telegraphed this strategy. Yet the former president cannot help himself. And yet he's your candidate, and yet he's the candidate at the top of the ticket for your party. Exactly, and it continues to be a very close race here. Because people are looking at what are the real world implications of policy, what are the last 4 years versus President Trump's 4 years. So yes, this is a bitterly divided nation. It comes down to parties, ideology, as well as style. There are many people that think his style is refreshing, that it is straight talk. that they are sick of having politicians lie to them with their doublespeak, and there are many people that find him to be incredibly unprofessional, incredibly unpresidential. He's certainly continues to be a very divisive figure in American politics.
You mentioned the last 4 years, and obviously there's been a change in the lineup from the last presidential debate. That came up a lot last night. Have a listen to this.
Viktor Orban said it. We had no problems when Trump was president, but when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, you talk about a threat to democracy. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her.
It's important to remind the former president you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me.
She is Biden.
Clearly, I am not Joe Biden. And I am certainly not Donald Trump.
Matthew, how successful was Donald Trump in framing Kamala Harris as a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency?
I'm not sure that articulating that or pinning her down on that is the president's forte. Yeah, I think it is. It is a reality for most Americans. They, from day one, have called this the Biden-Harris administration. So again, Kamala Harris, for all intents and purposes, they hid Joe Biden for 3.5 years. He was knocked out of the race at the last debate. Kamala Harris was appointed a presidential nominee, has hidden from the press, hidden from voters. This is a very big night for her. She did incredibly well. Yet President Trump, is frustrated. You can tell in this race. Politics is not fair. Life is not fair. He continues to struggle with this. But the reality of the situation is that most Americans understand the past 4 years, economically, domestically, at the border, internationally, versus the Trump's years.
Simon, did Kamala Harris manage to step out of the Biden administration's shadow? One of the things that people, I think, perhaps were looking for was a sense as to what she would actually do, who she actually was and what she would actually do. Did we get a sense of that?
I think powerfully. I mean, first of all, she had a lot of time to speak last night, and she laid out what she wants to do as president repeatedly throughout the entire night on every subject, and I think her core approach to the economic debate about how she wants people not just to get by, but get ahead came across very powerfully. And I think in terms of stepping out of the shadow, yes, she did. I mean, this was her moment. She needed her big job last night was to introduce herself to the American people and to make people who are tired of Trump and want to turn the page comfortable with her. And I think she did that last night successfully. And I think that I think that whole exchange you just played about how I'm not Joe Biden. I mean, look, there's been a discussion in political circles here in the U.S. about, who represents change. My God, I mean, look at the stage last night. If there was one change candidate, somebody who was going to bring better change, good change to the country, it was her.
Did she sell that idea of the economy and what her vision of the economy was? One of the questions was, are you better off now? It's a typical question. Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And nobody really answered that question. But the question I think that people are trying to figure out is whether her vision of the economy is going to make people better off. Do you think that she managed to pitch that?
Yeah, and I will just say, is that the country is better off today, far, far better off than when Donald Trump left office, 3.5 years ago. And I think that what she laid out last night, I mean, look, there's a very simple thing the Democrats are trying to do now, which is that we're fighting for you and he's fighting for himself, right? That we're trying to make your lives better. He's trying to keep himself out of jail and focus everything on himself. And I think that came across last night. Donald Trump talked about himself and not about the country. And I think that she's in a very powerful place right now. I mean, her economic program, just for example, I mean, we got a lot done over the last 3.5 years. The country is far better off. The economy is the envy of the world, according to the Wall Street Journal. And everyone who knows the data knows how strong the American economy has been. But she's been campaigning on something that is one of the things that didn't get done during the Biden administration, which is the housing crisis in the United States. She's made this central to her campaign, and this is a hugely important issue for middle-class people in the United States, young people, and she's put forward a very comprehensive, very thoughtful plan about how to increase housing supply. I think this has been a very important part of what she's been doing. She talked about it at length last night.
Matthew, the Republicans have been campaigning on this idea of being the party of the workers, of the union, of manufacturing, putting, what did Donald Trump say? People can't afford bacon, and that he was going to be able to figure out a way that people could afford bacon. Do you think that he was able to sell an economic plan that would reassure Americans who feel as though inflation and the state of the economy is not working for them?
Yeah, listen, this is much more about a feeling than an ideal, or certainly a policy proposal. The notion that affordability is the biggest defining issue here. And I think it's actually dangerous when Democrats try to go out and say, we are the envy of the world when Americans go to the grocery store, or the electric bill comes, or they have to get gas. Or put kids through college, must us go to a movie. Housing is a massive crisis. Kamala Harris, we have a massive supply side issue. She talked about giving people $25,000 to $50,000 more, feeding a demand issue. This is what is scary. She has talked about price controls, taxing unrealized gains. I think this is, the Achilles heel. The notion that the problem with the Joe Biden-Harris administration was that they just didn't spend enough money. If that's the case, then Kamala Harris will win. I'm not sure Americans view the federal government as that, and I'm not sure they view the economy and the everyday issues as the envy of the world right now.
I want to come back to policy in a moment, but there were some things that were said that I think will stick in people's minds by Donald Trump. Have a listen to Donald Trump from a few different points in this debate.
Her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
Matthew, both of those comments about executing babies and immigrants eating pets aren't true. Donald Trump said that he had heard it on television, this idea that people were eating pets in Springfield. Who is he hoping to appeal to with lines like that?
Unclear. I will say, both of those are from scant, one from Governor Northam of Virginia, a scant comment around abortion and hospitals and babies. And one, was someone who was testifying at their local city commission around, some of the challenges around immigration.
Do you have concerns about him being at the top of the ticket? I mean, Joe Biden was knocked out of the race because of the last debate and a sense of incoherence that came across. Do you have concerns seeing last night? Do you have concerns about Donald Trump being at the top of the ticket for the party that you support?
100% I do, until I look at the past 4 years of Democratic proposals which have caused inflation, a raging open border, a humanitarian crisis, where the quote-unquote adults in the room in foreign policy have now seen two regional, raging wars potentially turn into regional wars. So absolutely, I am not in denial that Donald Trump, has some deep personality flaws. Donald Trump, may not be the most articulate or best person, but if we are looking at the policies, would you rather be poor in America and Donald Trump's America, or middle class, or Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's? Again, who is providing better opportunity? Yeah, please.
Simon, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, look, we got to stay in a place of truth and as opposed to the fiction and the fantasies that we heard last night repeatedly. Donald Trump is living, and the Republicans are living in a place that's completely untethered. The American economy has been booming. We are the envy of the world. Inflation was caused not by the Democrats, but by COVID and OPEC raising oil prices and the Russian war in Ukraine. And inflation, we handled inflation better than any other developed country in the world. It's now down to zero. We've hit our targets on inflation while the economy continues to grow. I mean, I will defend the economic record of this president and this administration to the day I die. It has been an exemplary performance from the disaster that they inherited from the last president. And in terms of the border today, everyone should realize crime is down in America. It went up under Trump. We have the flows to the border today are lower than they were under the Trump presidency. We would have been here much faster if the Republicans and Donald Trump had not killed an important border bill that we tried to get passed earlier this year. But Joe Biden and Kamala Harris did this on their own. We can have a debate about policy, but at the end of the day, what we saw last, and I'm happy to have that debate, but the question you raised at the very beginning is, should we have deep concerns about whether or not Donald Trump is unfit, is unwell, and is not really connected to the world that we all live in every day. Yes, that's a serious concern. He repeatedly talked about things. This execution after birth is this unbelievably delusional, crazy speak that he engages in. So untrue, so outrageous, so bananas, right? And he did it again and again and again. He's unfit, he's unwell, he's untethered, and he cannot be president of the United States.
Let me ask you just further about the issue of abortion. On the issue of abortion, Kamala Harris had this to say.
You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law.
Matthew, is abortion an issue that could hurt Donald Trump's chances in November? He refused to say whether he would veto a national abortion ban. He was asked repeatedly about that. Is this an issue that could sink him?
If Donald Trump loses this election, I would argue that the overturning of Roe v. Wade and abortion reproductive rights is probably the number one factor in a potential defeat. Yes, this is a very powerful, personal, sometimes controversial issue. It has now been returned to the states. It is a local issue now, where the people closest who are affected will be able to have a say in this, yet it remains an incredibly powerful political issue. Again, we've talked about the issues. From the border to foreign policy, I'm shocked to hear that inflation and the economy and the pressures, the atmospheric pressures of affordability are continue to be envious. But I would concede that absolutely abortion is probably the number one issue that the Democrats have right now.
We just have a couple of minutes left, and I'll ask you both this. Matthew, do you think that what we saw last night will move the needle measurably? This is a very, very close race, but what impact will it have, do you think?
Again, it's unclear. This election will be decided with a handful of voters in a handful of states. And again, if you look at, do things help or hurt? I have to say, I do not think last night Donald Trump helped himself. Let's remember, he lost every debate to Hillary Clinton. There are atmospheric pressures at play with the economy, even the incumbency. Yet again, I do not think the former president served himself well last night.
And for all of that concern, will you still vote for him?
Unclear, candidly speaking. I'm not a fan of the president's personality.
So you would perhaps vote for Harris?
But boy, I look at Kamala Harris talking about price controls, taxing unrealized gains, and when people tell you how inflation and everything is just rosy under this administration, I find it incredibly far-fetched.
Simon, last minute or so to you. Will this move the needle at all? Again, are people baked in such that what they saw last night is not going to do anything? It's just going to reinforce what they already believe?
No, I think this was a very bad night for Donald Trump and a really good night for us. I mean, I think we were already in a position of strength in this election. We have a marginal, modest lead. Nationally, we have a much stronger campaign, a better candidate, better arguments. The burden was on Trump to fundamentally change the trajectory of the race last night, and he didn't do that. He reinforced the current trajectory, which is that we're in a stronger position. So we come out of this feeling really good today. Look, we know we got a lot of work to do. I mean, we've been through this before, but the Democratic Party right now has the strongest grassroots army that it's ever had. It's not even clear that Donald Trump has a real serious field operation on the ground in these key states. And so we feel good, but we know we got a lot of work to do. But this was a very good night because I think one of the most important thing that happened was that Kamala Harris made it very clear that she's ready to be president of the United States.
Clock is ticking. Just a couple of months, less than a couple of months until Election Day. Perhaps we will speak again before November. In the meantime, thank you very much for this.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Be well.
Simon Rosenberg is a Democratic strategist. He runs the Hopium Chronicles blog. Matthew Bartlett is a Republican strategist with Darby Field Advisors. Both were in Washington, D.C.